I think in this world that we live in, social media has put self-care so front and center that we've forgotten that community care and self-sacrifice actually leads to that connection that you can't experience any other way on planet Earth unless you're sacrificing a little bit of your comfort to experience true connection.
We already know what helps. Connection is the cure. It's our deep and meaningful relationships that give us hope and healing. Welcome to This Helps. I'm Marlon Morgan. Join us as we practice authentic and vulnerable conversations that inspire us to go deeper with the people in our own lives.
Hey.
Perfect energy. Perfect energy. I loved that. Getting more and more zoo crew every week.
Yeah. I run the douche. All right. Do you remember that character from Parks and Rec?
Parks and Rec, a lot of fun. You know what else is a lot of fun? You and our wonderful guest, Larissa May, who goes by Lars.
Larissa May was one of the smartest people I've ever talked to in my life, and I could barely keep up.
I think you did a great job. I love this conversation. I feel very lucky that you got to have it and that our listeners are going to get to hear it. She is like, well, I feel like I end up saying this a lot about our guests, which says something about our show and our guests, that like she's another one of those people who is actually doing good and making
She's helping.
changes, like for sure.
Larissa May, aka Lars, helps.
Big time. And has been since she was a kid, it seems like.
She started making headbands at 10 years old for cancer awareness for her dad's friend's daughter. She visited elderly people filled with wisdom and brought joy to their life. And she kept doing it all the way to like pitch rooms and venture capital firms and the Melinda Gates Foundation and just all kinds of incredible ways that she's really actually worked with the structure and capitalism in a way that she doesn't really feel like compromising. She is saying what she thinks and feels.
I think so. Yeah, it's really fascinating and encouraging, I think.
Yeah, brings a lot of integrity to the show and hope in a way that, you know, it's hard. It's harder to actually work within what is here on Earth and like all the problems and issues and stay positive, stay hopeful, create solutions to the problems we're seeing and make people feel better. Much harder to do that than it is to just like kind of listen and judge and talk trash and all of that, which I think we can all fall into that as well.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, I felt totally hopeful. I felt like I learned a lot. There were times where we had to stop Lars and ask her to explain a few things from different sectors that she's in. But overall, great conversation.
Definitely. And if you watch the video version over on our YouTube, get a little peek at her dog, Tito.
Tito, adorable. Really looks like, and I know those of you without 3-year-olds may not relate, but Pig the Pug. If you've been to a Scholastic Book Fair recently, you're going to see a lot of Pig the Pug. And he's kind of a villainous character, but he's real cute. And it looks like Tito.
All I want to do is talk about the book fair now, but we have to let people listen to this episode.
For all of us who a natural intro to a podcast where we talk about some things but not everything about the guest, if for all of you who that just won't do, Andrea, can you please read us a very comprehensive and technical bio for the guest we're about to talk to, Larissa May?
Yeah, Lars is the founder of Half the Story. It's a nonprofit leading the charge on digital wellness for young people. She's the co-founder of Ginkgo, which is a doctor-backed parenting app that helps families navigate tech from the toddler years to TikTok. She spent the last decade turning her personal story into a national movement, working with students, lawmakers, and mental health experts to help the next generation build a healthier relationship with their screens.
Nice.
Let's get into it.
Let's do it. Larissa May, we are so excited to have you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for the invitation. This is quite a treat in the middle of a day of many calls that don't always feel like we're getting to the core of what humans are about. So here we are.
You are in the right place. I don't even want to talk about anything else other than what humans are actually about, because I'm still trying to figure it out. And I think you might have some very good insights for us.
I can share what I don't know, and maybe it helps other people know.
That's great. Yeah, we're starting off with some humility and some wisdom. And actually, I'm going to start off the way that I have been watching a few of your talks lately. And you started really early in your life, sort of helping people, I would say. And I want you to speak more to that. But one thing that you said that has stuck with me through a couple days of just kind of getting to know you through your work, and that is, you can't change the world with fear.
Mm.
Can you explain? I've wanted to hear you, and I feel like you say it at the end of other talks, so you don't get a chance to really go all in on it. But tell me what that means.
Well, I think there's a lot of ways into that, but what I usually start with is there anything in your life that someone has scared you to do so much so that it leads to long-term behavior change? Not for me. Ultimately, from a macro level perspective, when you look at the world and what you want to fight for, when I initially started doing this work that has become my life's work by complete accident, I really looked to a couple of people as the people I wanted to model my journey off of. And the first and the most important was a woman named Gloria Steinem, for those of you that are listening that might know her. And what I learned from her was really three key things. One is that stories have the power to change the world. Two, if you have the privilege to share your story, you better be able to use your platform to give it to someone who couldn't. But third, hope is human medicine and can move us from a place of fear or apathy into action. And I actually had the opportunity to meet her a couple of times, and I had a fundraiser for her last year and for her legacy instead of us for our 10-year anniversary at Half the Story. And it was really because of a couple years ago, I sat in her living room and she looked at me, and I was still young, I think around 24, 25 years old. And she said, Lars, I don't know too much about this whole technology thing, but what I do know is you need to stop telling people to unplug, and you need to start telling people to plug into life. And you need to really reframe how you're talking about this. And that planted a seed for me. And I started to zoom out and look at the world and see, how do we manipulate people into behavior change? And it's really a lot of short-term transactional change driven by fear, because fear fits our bottom line, especially in America. But when I started being on the ground with kids in communities that were already afraid of so many other things in their life, I realized that the real hope or medicine for our world was really empowerment, and it was positivity, and it was engaging, not in a way that disregards the truth and the pain of what we experience as humans, but really, to flip life on its head and think about what could be possible. And I think I realized, I could be a tiny star in a dark night that plays into the darkness, or I could say, I'm going to be a shooting star and I'm going to come in guns blazing in a world that's really dark, and I'm going to be that person. And I think once I made that decision, I started realizing how powerful it was when you sit with a young person and you say, well, what could we do if we used AI to design a neighborhood where everyone could be safe? What could we do if we don't have phones at school? And then the answers become screen-free prom and friendship benches at lunch so that we can relearn how to connect with one another. And so I think I've just fallen in love with, what does it mean to motivate through hope? Quite frankly, because it's a lot more fun.
Yeah, it's less depressing for sure.
Yeah. And I think when you're like, I've already got to give so much of myself to show up for the world, you can either come in guns blazing with your heart on fire, or you can come in guns blazing with the goal to kill someone else's fire. And for me, I really want to set the world on fire, not through a false sense of hope, but with knowledge that drives power through the lens of, yes, you can do something.
I'm already inspired. I want to know when you came up with this life's goal to make things better.
I love this. And I'll answer this from the lens of not just a career lens, but a human lens, because I think that's what's important. And when I was a little girl, I struggled a bit socially, and I was always really academically driven and very creative, and I never really fit in the world's box. And in the 90s, that was not the time of breaking through the boxes. It was about kind of fitting in and rolling with the punches, and everything was kind of just status quo. It's going to be fine. But when I was young, I had such an affinity towards service because it was actually one of the best ways that I could deal with loneliness or what I was experiencing or pain, was actually stepping out of my own story and stepping into someone else's. And so as a little kid, I spent a lot of time volunteering at nursing homes. I started a headband company to raise money for kids' cancer, like all of these flower headbands. And I just made them in my house in my backyard, partially because my dad's friend's daughter at 10 years old had died from cancer. And I think I just would always sit around, whether it was that or coming to my own doctor appointments with ideas on how to cure things that were completely off base, but it was a good college try. I think I was just so in love with identifying and had so much curiosity around, why does the world have so much trouble, but why do people experience so much pain? And how can I help solve these things? And so it started at a super young age. And even through college, I was volunteering at a children's cancer unit at Vanderbilt. And I think in this world that we live in, social media has put self care so front and center that we've forgotten that community care and self sacrifice actually leads to that connection that you can't experience any other way on planet Earth unless you're sacrificing a little bit of your comfort to experience true connection.
This is already one of my favorite episodes. I feel like you just brought up like 3 different sort of ideas for a book that we need to read. So let's stick with that last one, the community care versus self-care. What about the idea that people don't like being uncomfortable? I can already tell that part of this is going to be sort of therapy for me because I had a lot of the same experiences, but I'm not nearly as evolved. So I think what we're going to do is I'm going to come from, 10-year-old Marlon, who was not selling headbands, but also did recognize at some level how sad everything was. So are you up for that though? Because I don't want to put you in that spot.
Yeah, I'm game.
Okay. Okay.
Little
'Cause
Lars and little Marlon meet.
yeah, I love it. I love it. Okay. Well, luckily I still have the same cheeks. So when I see myself in the camera, I can just,
Well, I'll send you guys a photo of my younger self after this episode, and you'll be like, you're the same person. And I'll be like,
oh
yeah.
my gosh. So let's pretend we are growing up now and we're both 10 and sort of in, this is going to be a little bit closer to my heart in some ways than it would normally because I have actually just turned 12 and a 3-year-old. So I'm going to be thinking about them. They're much cooler than I was. But so say we're both 10 and we're stepping into this world. What are we learning about the world now that we didn't learn in the 90s?
Well, the reality is that you have a window into children being shot and wounded all across the world without even asking to see it.
So what does that mean? I mean, that sounds very upsetting. And how does that affect us as 10-year-olds?
What's really challenging about growing up as a child now is that when we grew up in the 90s, we had speed bumps metaphorically, emotionally, and socially to scaffold these human experiences to ensure that when we did come up against them later on, we would have the skills from the inside out to take care of ourselves when that showed up. And digital wellness is actually an inside job. Screens are just a symptom of what you're experiencing. But many of our kids, they're waking up and opening devices without really having the care toolkit to understand how to metabolize that media and care for themselves and others before it overrides them. And let's be honest, parents have also not been trained to navigate this, yet your kids are growing up on screens. 40% of toddlers have their own devices. The average teen in America will spend 30 years of their life behind a screen. And so it's no longer a question of what is your real world and your digital world. It's how do you preserve your child's humanity in a world that's accelerating innovation and prioritizing pace over personal pursuit and passion.
Well, there were a lot of great alliterations that made that even better. And I want to focus on that idea of we're focused so much on efficiency. And you're saying that it's in some ways costing us personal growth and living out our passions.
100%.
Why? Why are we doing this?
Well, I think there's the big W and the small W. I think the big question, and I think this is the one that you really reckon with, is why do we believe that handicapping humanity for the sake of capitalism is worth it?
Wondered if you were going to bring that word up.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I think we're all capitalists and we play into that system, and that is part of how we function and operate, but I'm really concerned that the people that dominate our consciousness from a media lens and perspective, and the fear that we bask in, and the tech leaders that predominantly have been the same ones for the last decade, are evolving as humans in convergence with technology and have not been able to preserve their moral compass. Yet they have more power than any government on planet Earth based on the number of people they can manipulate. And I think that it's interesting, and I sit in this place and I see, all these debates around the governments and the global conflicts, but the truth is tech is the biggest government on planet Earth, and there's about 5 to 10 people that own that market share that have control over billions of people's perspectives. And that's what keeps me up, but that's also what keeps me going, because I really want to change that and fight against that, and show people that not that it's a girl against the boys, but to show people that we don't have to change the world through fear, and that at the end of the day, life is just all about an opportunity cost. Like, if you're willing to do this, you're losing that. And I think a lot of these people probably built these social platforms because they might have felt alienated as young people too, like us, but the direction they went was just the opposite. And I have a lot of compassion for these people and their younger selves, which might be a very bizarre way to look at them. But when I look at a world leader or a CEO that is hurting people, I try to think about, well, why are you hurting, and what have you not been able to meet in your life? Because it allows me to come at it from a place of care as opposed to a place of conflict.
If we're 10 and we're in a class, and let's say there is a CEO in that class as well, same age, what's happening in that 10-year-old life that is going to ultimately lead to sort of these destructive patterns?
It's not being seen. It's not being heard. It's not being felt. And it's certainly the lack of the ability to identify with your own emotions, which is something that I think technology is robbing a lot of our kids from. Because the average human actually feels about 400 emotions a day, but oftentimes when you ask a kid and they're using their device, it's either good, bad, or bored.
Yeah. Yeah. And bored, often that word gets thrown around our house sometimes. And I try to go a little bit deeper, because it's usually something behind that isn't bored, because I don't think bored really is an emotion, right? Or is it?
I don't think bored is a emotion. I think it's a state and a being. I'd have to ask, pull up my, go to my Mark Brackett book and ask
Ruler.
him. But yeah, but I mean, depending on the seriousness of it, I mean, and I mean this in all truth, I've never been bored in my life, ever.
Yeah.
And I think that boredom is a lack of, honestly, inspiration and maybe even self-confidence to be able to create your own joy or your own direction. And I think kids, one of my favorite people, Dr. Rich, who runs the digital wellness lab at the Boston Children's Hospital, always says, we got to bring boredom back.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Rich, great two-parter on this show. If you want to hear from him more, please go back and listen, because I think that's still in like our top 5 of most listened episodes. So thanks for bringing up Dr. Rich.
He's amazing.
Yeah.
I met
Yeah.
him now almost a decade ago, and it was
Oh,
one of
wow.
his patients who introduced us.
Wow. He made everyone cry, including me, when he told the story about a boy he was taking care of. And I'm not going to ruin it or retell it, but he said something, and I don't know if you've heard him say, you can't always cure, but you can always heal.
Mm.
And that seems kind of like, with the work that you're doing, which we haven't gotten into because of how aggressively I came at getting to know you and how much coffee I drank this morning. But I would like to get into your work.
Yeah.
And how you are not necessarily curing our situation, in our interactive or how we interact with media or not interact or all of that, but also how you're helping people heal.
Yeah. I'm like, well, I think it comes in many different forms. So I'm thinking about what way in you want me to kind of approach that through.
Well, I love half the story. I would love for us to not skip that. And then I think you have some other projects you're working on now too that I do want to get into and find out how you're balancing, because I've heard you talk about the entrepreneurial spirit, and because I've seen and you successfully partner with other folks who probably, I don't know, I'm just assuming, like capitalism more than you. And so let's start with half the story and how that got started.
I started half the story with $250 in my dorm room at one of the darkest periods of my life. And I was really the first generation to go into college without an emotional road guide for how to handle digital technologies.
What year, circa, I don't want to give away, personal details, but circa what year are we in?
This was around like 2015. And for me, I was a sophomore in college. Well, when I started half the story, I was a junior, but when I was a sophomore, I was really struggling, which really what that looked like was spending more time in my room scrolling than I was sleeping, studying, strolling, or socializing. And my best friend from freshman year was my roommate and quickly moved out of my dorm because I was depressed down the hallway. And so it was what I remember from that time very viscerally was people walking across the hallway, going out, and really just that echo of hearing that I was just inside scrolling because it felt like I was trapped in a hamster wheel that I couldn't escape. And luckily my RA was a med school student or pre-med and came up to me and said, I don't know who this Lars is, and I'm really worried about you. And I really think you should go to the PCC on campus to get psychological care. And quite frankly, I had a lot of suicidal ideation. I really was just feeling like I don't know what the point is to stick around here.
So you felt, hopeless, sounds
I
like.
was so helpless. I was like, and I never missed a day of school in my life pretty much. And I don't know, I really lost my footing in who I was. And I think I was just really confused. And yet again, like, is this like, why do I so badly want to be out in the world creating and doing? And I just think, even though I really succeeded in school and was very academically driven, the culture of academia, especially American college institutions, was just not one that I really connected with. And that could be isolating as well.
It was not one you connected with. Is that what
Not
you
one
said?
I connected with, no. And I was much more interested in going out, being on set, starting my own things. And honestly felt a bit chained to this idea that, wow, I have to wait 4 years to go out in the world and do something. And it was actually a couple of professors who I'm still in touch with, which is pretty wild, that really changed that journey for me because I realized that I wanted to start taking classes with adjunct professors. So teachers that had one foot in academia and one foot in the real world. And there were two professors that really changed my journey. One was Dr. Bob Isherwood, and he was actually the worldwide creative director of Saatchi and Saatchi. And his class was great because it was about whoever had the best work got an A. If you had the worst work, you didn't pass, and you didn't find out till mid-semester, end of the semester when you did a portfolio review, because that's how the ad world works. So for me, I thrived in that environment. Everyone else was terrified. And then I had an investigative journalist professor who really encouraged us to do our own projects, which is really where I started interviewing people on campus and handing out half the story stickers to understand, what are you hiding behind? What is that other half the story that you have on social media? And basically, I moved to New York and just spent a couple of years interviewing young people all around the world. And I was the first employee at two consumer startups, while also still pretty broke in New York, putting all of my personal money into a nonprofit, which is a very unique thing to do if you're not a philanthropist and you're kind of young and broke. But
Yeah.
anyways, I just knew that this was what I was supposed to fight for. And I realized, okay, no one understands the story. Once I started realizing that this was a global issue, talking to kids all over, then I was like, I need to do something about this. And so around the pandemic, everything really changed, and it was an uphill battle. I wound up leaving New York and moving into an attic of a barn in Sonoma, which is now where I live, and kind of really pursuing and having this awakening that if I wanted to work in digital wellness in this space, New York City was not a place to walk the walk. And at a pretty young age, I kind of gave up that entire reality, which is one I was good. I was great at the game. I was at 25 years old leading marketing at a consumer non-elk brand and Bella Hadid's launch at Fashion Week. Like, I was a high performing girl on top of all the other stuff I was doing for half the story.
I wish we had a whole episode to deconstruct the sentence that you just shared with us. I think people got brand, Bella Hadid. Can you just explain that a little bit? Because there is a lot there.
Yeah. So I was a first employee at a non-alc beverage company called Can Euphorics, and Jen Batchelor, who's the founder, is amazing. And then Bella Hadid wound up joining the business, and the business is doing really well now, but it was really wild to be tasked with like leading her joining the business and a whole Fashion Week launch and partnership. And I was doing that at a really young age. And so I think for me, and I say this, but I'm kind of a bulletproof founder in that nothing phases me. I mean, I have been tested to the end of the earth in every way. And I think that's part of just, that purpose. Like, pain and purpose can coexist, but you get really good at prioritization. So for me, at a young age, I was very good at marketing and branding, and I knew how to tell stories, which is really everything that we do. And then I started looking at the market and seeing, why is no one educating young people about digital wellness in schools? And if they are, why is this stuff so boring? Because honestly, I was looking at what was out there and I was like, no kids are ever going to want to touch this. Like, this is honestly just like, for something that is grounded in innovation, which is tech, the wellness is really lagging behind in terms of school systems. And so basically what I wanted to do was take an IDEO approach, so really co-designing with young people. And then I wanted to infuse play into it so that we could drive behavior change through game design and develop curriculum, which we had called Social Media U, to actually give kids the emotional wellness skills that they will need in the digital age through really memorable experiences. And so a really like simple but good example of that is, instead of just telling kids about how the digital world can impact their mental health, an example of this is that we designed a game called Crash Out. I actually had about 100 Jenga sets in my house until yesterday that we were sending to Girls Inc. affiliates. And it's a game that really represents for middle school kids This is your cognitive load. This is what crashing out or, basically burning out in the digital world is, and kind of playing through these different scenarios and how, by the actions that you would take for yourself or others, how that would impact your physical ecosystem, emotional ecosystem, your school ecosystem, your after school ecosystem, and get kids before they even have their own devices to start thinking about what they would be doing in these scenarios and trying on these shoes, as opposed to showing up on day one in the digital world and saying, I don't know what to do. There's a bus coming at me, whatever that feels in the digital world. There's a person being bullied, or I'm feeling really bad about the way I look. Like, really giving kids those skills earlier on and looking at them and speaking to them like adults. Because the truth is that kids are growing up faster than ever. And I think my sweet sauce has been realizing that when you put young people at the center of anything that you design or create for them, magic can happen. And so I got our first grant that was six figures in the pandemic that kind of tipped the iceberg for me. And I was like, wow, if someone wants to invest $100,000 into this, it means I have to go all in. And so since then, we've been able to launch with Discovery Education. We've partnered with Girls Inc. National, so two of the best sort of in school and after school partners, and we're bringing this into different schools and partnering with other organizations to make digital wellness accessible to every young person on the planet. And that's really our vision. And so that's, where we've rooted a lot of our educational work. And I think especially right now at a time where, we have almost 30 states in America putting these bell to bell phone ban policies in, what we know is that policy alone is not enough to create change. You need educational infrastructure. You need to be empowering youth and teen leaders and really bringing together educators and teens where there tends to be a lot of friction to be able to create a more positive school culture. And I think a lot of what we think about is, how do we create a new culture around digital wellness? How do we create a new story? And unfortunately, education or media or whatever world you're working in, I think we've forgotten that culture is the human element of community, and then it looks different everywhere.
Well, part of what we do on the show, Lars, is bring new concepts to people and help them understand what's being done not in their field. And so a lot of folks who listen are leaders in education or mental health clinicians, people who work directly with students and in schools. And so one thing I want to start with is, you mentioned, I think, a different approach to getting this started. You said an IDEO approach.
IDEO. Yeah.
Yeah. What is that?
So, human-centered design. So, a lot of our work was really rooted in play testing and bringing, and it still is. I touch a teen, anyone that I serve at the end of the day, whether it's a parent or a teen, I'm talking to at least one of them every single day. And I firmly believe that we've lived in a world where we design for people instead of with people. And in order to ensure that you're taking an equitable approach that goes outside of just your world or your window, it requires meeting young people in rural Indiana and testing your programming there, which is something that we've done because it's a really different landscape than being in Marin or San Francisco, where people are very technologically savvy. And I think especially because digital wellness is a new health concept, we're early enough in it to ensure that we don't create the same inequities that we have in other areas of wellness for our children on a global level. And that's something that I feel very passionate about. And I believe that digital wellness is digital equity. And if we can be thinking about those two things together, that we can lead to healthier outcomes for our kids.
Someone is going to raise their hand and ask if this is in person. I'm a parent or I'm an educator, and they're going to say, what does it look like to be digitally well?
It's a good question. So the way that I would answer that is that digital wellness is a journey. It's not a destination. It's the ability to develop healthy and positive skills so that over time you have a more positive outcome from the digital world than a negative one. And that's different based on your age and stage of cognitive development. But giving those kids that shift to go from mindless tech consumption into mindful tech consumption. What we're doing right now is mindful and active. If I was just mindlessly scrolling on TikTok, I'd still be engaging with technology, but the outcome would be largely negative. And so, how we metabolize media is different based on our intention and the action that we're taking on it. And I think that our society has sort of rooted itself in this all screen time is created equal mentality when the truth is it is not. And if we can index for our kids to more mindfully engage, then our outcomes will be better.
At what point, and have you seen anything that is hopeful when it comes to not using an addiction model, not going to the bottom of the brainstem? And let me explain that even a little bit more in that when you're talking about this, and when I think about or talk to other folks, we've talked to, Dr. Schneider at the Google Center for Mental Health Excellence or Dr. Rich, and I often will picture their business model as like a casino. Like if you ever been like, no, hopefully no one's offended in Reno when I say I've been to some pretty bummery casinos there. And it's smoky. You have no idea what time of day or night it is. The whole idea is like based on what am I going to feel next, based on the probability of me getting some dopamine and the whole idea behind the casino, everyone knows it, is to keep you distracted and on their platform, which is just in their gross building. How have you seen progress with this? And is that correct? Am I wrong about that?
Well, I'm going to be super honest with you. The slot machine was social media 1.0. With AI, you are no longer touching the slot machine, you are living in the slot machine because we're moving from a place where you have to search to where content is serving you and adapting towards you with AI models. And that's a key thing that's changing. But here's what I'm going to say to go back into the hope piece. And I this goes to our programming. So one of the really interesting things when I started looking at this space a couple years ago, and my research partner on this, Dr. Rachel Hannabit, who I started doing research with when she was pursuing her PhD and now she's at Georgetown, she really focuses on teen centric research, which is what we really paved the way for at Half the Story. When we started looking initially at how to measure this, most of the scales that were created in this space were largely positioned as deficit oriented, which makes it really hard to understand.
What do you mean by that, real quick? Sorry to
Yeah,
interrupt you.
so deficit oriented is like it's like naming everything as problematic social media use scale, XXXX. Now, if we want to strive towards a society that is rooted in digital wellness, but we're only using scales to make people a little bit less digitally sick, how can we possibly think about a comprehensive way to measure that for young people? And so what we've actually really focused on at Half the Story is using a scale. It's the digital flourishing scale. And we have the largest actually research base of people under the age of 18. And what this scale does is actually is looking at 21 different aspects of how digital technologies impact a child online and offline. So sleep hygiene, academic engagement, sense of self, like looking at both the inside and the outside roles. Now, when we think about our programmatic success, there's really two things that we're always looking for. One, would teens recommend it to a friend? And two, are we seeing a positive increase in digital flourishing, which is digital habits, perceived habits? We want to do a RCT over time. And we've actually been able to see statistically relevant changes through our programming. And actually, for our kids, like that, I would say 3 out of every 14 wants to recommend it to a peer. And for teens, it's a pretty tough group. So we're pretty happy about that. And our summer program, which is honestly wild, it's our civics academy where we upskill the next generation of leaders through a free program. They go into tech companies and tell them to change features. They go speak to politicians. They go learn about how to tell stories in news and press and protect themselves. So we actually had kids in 6 continents and I believe 45 cities this year, and 100% of them said that they would want a friend to do it. And that to me was pretty remarkable because I think when you see teens going into the center of this work, like you can see magic happen. And now actually in New York State, we've partnered with the governor to design a teen council to take our work that we do in DCA, Digital Civics Academy, and apply that to a state model so that we can empower and train teen leaders to help work with admins and teachers and implementing bell to bell in a less fear-based way, but more through the lens of how can we get teens to plan their own screen-free social activities and really index on the human side of the school culture.
I love that. I got a chance to speak with the superintendent of LA Unified not too long ago, and then also had a show with their medical director, Dr. Malhotra. What Smitha or Dr. Malhotra mentioned is the biggest challenge is when you take away phones and adding something back in. And I was picturing, I'm always trying to think of simple ways to understand things, obviously. And I pictured like saying, okay, there's no lunch anymore at school. You just have to wait till you get home to eat. And then like not putting healthy food in or not putting real opportunities for relationship. But what you just described was operationalizing that and like programmatically making sure it happens, which made me talk about hope. That was awesome.
And that's what we aim to do. And hopefully we create a really strong blueprint for other states to be able to model that, because otherwise it's going to feel really negative. And I think when we're also thinking about that, when we talk to kids, it's, do you want to chase dreams or do you want to live your life behind a screen? And like, what is that aspirational point of view that you want to have when there's two ways in. One is put your phone down. The other is tell me about all the dreams you have. Like, what would you do with 30 years of your life back? And that's kind of how I like to go in.
When you talk to kids, do you ever hear my dreams are to become well-known on social media or to be an influencer? And so all my dreams are like wrapped up in being behind a screen.
All the time.
How do you respond?
I usually try to understand why. And I ask them, like, why do you, what's driving you to do this? And actually, it's largely more of an American thing. I actually went on a meditation retreat in Japan last year at the end of the year and ended the last couple days with a bunch of teen leaders. And it was interesting because in America, depending on the group that you're in, you get a few influencers in every bunch. But when I was in Japan, what I found to be so interesting was that the teens said, and I'll never forget this, for me, I want inner peace because I know that inner peace is the first step to world peace. And I found that,
Jeez.
yeah, that was a real awakening for me, and realizing, especially in this work, in a moment where a child says that they want to be an influencer when they grow up, the goal is not to get them to not want to be an influencer. The goal is for them to understand, like, what is it that's getting in the way of the peace that I really want to feel in a way that's really that they're able to grasp. And in the world that we're in, I mean, adults don't really feel at peace. So how could our kids that are living in a neurobiological storm in the digital world experience that? And so it's a very interesting time. And I think that a lot of our kids as well, because of the speed in which they experience things on social media, they're also expecting shortcuts through life. And they think that you can do something overnight when, quite frankly, there is no way. And I think now, being in this work for 10 years and showing up when no one was listening, I have a lot of reverence for people who commit to the bit. And just like you all have, devoted your lives and gained expertise. And anyone that thinks that it happens faster than that, they're being sold something that's fake. And I wish that I could tell younger people that, who think that Forbes 30 under 30 or being valedictorian and all of that is going to solve all your problems. It's actually never really a destination. It's actually the journey to getting to a place where you could have all the wins in the world and realize, like, this is great and life is filled with so much more meaning than just this destination.
I hate to give any airtime to this right afterwards, and I don't anticipate you're going to want to spend much time with me here, but I often wonder how we aren't able to use sometimes the world's most successful people as examples of not having inner peace, of literally having it all that you can have. If I was the richest person on earth, and I'm definitely not talking about anyone in particular, like, I wouldn't even be on social media. I'd be like, I hope I'd be just trying to help people, or be like in Santorini or something. I don't know, but certainly not posting on X
Yeah.
or buying it.
And I think you answered your question, which is that money doesn't buy peace.
But also what you just said doesn't make money. I think everything that we are selling people online through attention economy and through ads is that it does. Is
Mm.
that it buys you meaning. It's going to fulfill some of your most human longings. And it's really the key to power, and maybe even the key to putting yourself back together after a negative childhood or not getting what you needed.
I mean, I think, you know, the headline to me, which I always really think about, is like, if money is your only motivation, it will never be enough. And it's okay to want to be able to like pay your rent and pay for your kids' food. And I think everyone should be able to do that. I just think you have to be really conscious about, there's a really good book about generous leadership and what type of leader you want to be. And do you want to be a taker or a giver? And, you know, I've had an immense opportunity to see people on both ends of the spectrum. You know, they could have the same type of net worth, but completely different experiences. And I think for me, I gauge someone's character based on, are you able to sit on the ground next to the thing that you fund? And what I mean by that is, can you walk in the room in a school in a urban or rural or super rundown place and comfortably sit on the ground next to these kids and look them in the eye, or sit with these parents who have lost kids to social media and connect them on a human level? And I think a lot of people struggle with the human element when they're so disinfected from society, when they live in these chambers of wealth and power. And a lot of times I feel like my role is honestly that channel and that gateway for them to re-experience what humanity feels like, and to be able to say, hey, I see you're here and you want to make a change on the ground. But what that's also going to require is that you leave your Hermes flats at the door and you get barefoot in the mud and you sit here with me and you hear what this real thing is, unfiltered from these girls. And it might be harder than what you're really ready for, but like, if you want to see truth, like, I'll show you and I'll take you there. And I think, you know, I don't know, I think it's, life is a complicated place, but I think I've also met a lot of incredible people that anonymously, to your point, have been absolutely groundbreaking in the impact in my journey. I've also had people in really unexpected places that you would never imagine that were uh really really willing to put their arm out and help me in a way that, if they hadn't had the success that they did in the world, whatever they were doing, there's no way I would be here now. And my job is to take those learnings to ensure that, you know, regardless of whoever I become or not, you know, in the next 20 years, if I'm ever in a place of immense power, influence, and capital, that I take all these lessons and I use that capital really wisely, because I've seen a lot of really bad examples, but I've also seen a lot of good ones. And I think that's powerful.
You're giving me hope about billionaires. So can you keep doing that? And
I wouldn't even say it's billionaires. I think, to be honest with you, the most generous people that I've met are actually the people that are below that billionaire class, but still have a lot of net worth. And I think that that's a really interesting thing. And I think in our world, most billionaires are so busy, they probably aren't even having dinner with their kids, quite frankly. But there are some that stand out. And there's also a lot of billionaires who have people working below them on their team that are those 100 millionaires. And they give away money more than anyone than you would imagine. And I think that's important for people to know too, that I think we put so much pressure on the billionaires to do things, but it's actually not even them that I've seen the most impact from.
we can keep this anonymous, but are you open to telling us a story about someone who sat on the floor next to someone that they were helping in some way to fund?
It's a really great question. You know, the first version of that, and I'll tell you about a woman, and I'm happy to use her name because she's the person I think of when this happened. So I went to Aspen Ideas last year, which is a dream come true to speak at it. And I did kind of a 20-minute fireside.
Congratulations, by the way.
Thank
Awesome.
you.
Yeah.
It was like this. And after that, there were a slew of people that came up to me and were like, "Oh, this is so interesting, whatever." But, most of the people in those audience, they're interested in one thing for a minute and then they go move on with their life. And so, what I do when people say this is so interesting, instead of giving them my card, what I do is I say, "Give me your email or your phone number. I'm going to write it down. I'm going to take a selfie of us. I'm going to email you or text you right after this. Or else you're never going to remember me because you have 400, maybe an acquisition you're doing or all this other stuff." Right. And there was a woman that came up to me and she was just like, "I really want to talk to you." And I walked outside the door and she just like completely like jumped on top of me and gave me a hug and was like, "You need to meet him, Brian Collier, who is her executive director." And she was like, "We can make a decision in 3 days. Like, she's essentially the funder. We want to help you." And like, she just totally met me where I was at and was like, "I see that you're a young girl and like you almost lost your life. And I've experienced these things in my life and with my kids." And like, she just like quite literally met me where I was. And in that moment, I was like, and I said this to her at Aspen, I said, "Sally, I can't wait to just bring you on the ground with with these kids because you are who embodies that in my ecosystem." And I think the first step is, can people meet me where I'm at before I can even take them in those rooms with those kids, because it can be really painful. And yeah, quite frankly, I think a lot of people feel uncomfortable being in service and they feel a lot more comfortable giving money and like staying away from it because it's so far from their experience. And I don't always think it's a good idea for those people to be engaging with them. You know who does a really good job at this too? Oprah Winfrey. I got to go on her show, and the way like I met her, and I've always idolized her being in Chicago. I used to write her notes as like a girl. The way that she can sit with any person in the world and meet their soul where it is on its journey is unlike anything I've ever seen. Whether it be parents in the front row whose children have died to social media, or one of the top politicians in the world, like seeing her magic in action while also having her best friend Gal in the front row was just so incredible to me. And when I walked onto her set, I started talking to this guy who was her makeup artist that I didn't realize till the end, and we were, like, having a heart to heart and crying about how some of his siblings had died. Like, it was like being at church, and I think it was just a reminder of, like, when you walk into something, pay attention to how you feel, because how you feel oftentimes dictates the truth, and then what you think about sometimes can pull you away from that, and it just felt so right.
Well, again, how you feel sometimes dictates the truth, and what you think can pull you away from that. I just want to re-say that because I think people might miss it. There's so much there. Explain that.
I think it's actually just that simple, is that when you walk into a space, you're so often thinking about what you wanna get out of that space and just sort of seeing, what does it feel like? What does it feel like to be with this person or this potential hire or this potential donor? And let your body do the talking because it knows. And in a world that is so driven by speed and AI and efficiency and all these things that we're talking about, I just I think that we have to go back to our more human intuitive senses and pay attention. What is this person's body language like? Are they pulling out their phone? Like, there's so much that you get from a person without even having to speak. And so what I would encourage is for people to observe and feel before they think and act.
You've mentioned emotional granularity and kind of people being able to self-regulate, and all of these things. It almost sounds like you're describing the benefits of being able to identify how you think and feel.
Yeah.
You have another project that might be related to that. I think it's called Ginkgo.
Yes. And so I guess to first kind of answer, like, how do you do it? I've been doing Half the Story for 10 years. I'm now at a place where the leaders on my team are so much better at education and have 20 years of experience on me. My job is to light people up and get them to open their wallets and fund our
Hmm.
work, and that's my superpower now. It wasn't that for a long time, but I think for me, I'm such an entrepreneur and I like to solve hard problems. And so what I was ultimately what was happening and what led to the impetus of Ginkgo was after being in the public education sphere, I had pediatricians, school counselors, law enforcement officers, parents reaching out to me saying, "Hey, what do I do if my kid's being groomed? What do I do if my kid is autistic and is struggling with regulation on YouTube?" And felt that there was such a disconnect between scientific, evidence-based support and the digital world, and it was really the wild, wild west. And so
What's
my
always
best
changing too.
yeah, it's always changing, and 70% of pediatricians don't ask about it, but they also can't possibly keep up because things are always evolving and shaping. And so for me, I said, "Okay, I've really figured out kids. Now how could I actually build something that helps our kids get better care because we can take the learnings of what they're experiencing and how they engage with the digital world to paint a picture of their health." So, in many forms, half the story was the thing I needed when I was struggling as a young person. Ginkgo is the tool that my parents or my pediatrician would have needed to help be able to get to the root of what I was going through faster. And so, Ginkgo is actually not even really public to the world yet. It will, I mean, we're in beta right now, but what it is a doctor-backed clinical compass to help parents navigate every dilemma in the digital world and to connect them to care when they need it. And our vision over time is to create screen freedom for every family on the planet, which is that sheer shift from fear to freedom by giving parents tools that they need in the wee hours of the night to stay up to date on trends and research and to be actually able to do something. So when Apple comes out, or call it USA Today, says, "Hey, kids that are using screens have heart problems," and it leaves it there at the headline, Ginkgo, on top of the clinical advice, will deliver that to our parents and say, "Hey, here's breaking news and here's what you can do about it today. Yes,
Wonderful.
this trend is happening, but here's what you can do now tonight to do this with your kids." And in the future, as we build out the kids side, what our goal is to actually be able to say, "Hey, parents, based on these things that are happening in the digital world, how your kid is engaging with their technology, we actually would really encourage you to advocate and share this with your pediatrician or clinician to get them tested for IEPs, dyslexia, etc., because there's so much about how a child engages with the digital world that can tell us about their holistic well-being picture." And so we want to be able to, and a lot of like get to the root of comorbidities faster, which oftentimes coexist with problematic social media use or tech at large.
Is that headline a real headline? I mean, is that a problem? I didn't know about that.
Yeah, so there was I'm thinking about this because I was looking at our nudge and our contents. I'll have to give
You
you'll
got
get
me
a
with you've engaged me with curiosity. There's no way I wouldn't click on that.
well, that's the interesting piece, is that a lot of parents haven't really even been brought up to speed on this. So Ginkgo is really going to be able to deliver that. But yeah, let me give you some insights on this and break it down. So literally just a couple of days ago or a week ago, there was a new study that came out. It was actually a study it's a Danish study that actually found that more screen time was correlated to affecting children's heart health. And that was a first time that we'd actually seen a digital study be connected to heart health and well-being. And
And
so
not a metaphor though, because we know it's also connected to their
soul.
actual soul,
No,
heart and
no,
soul health. Okay.
no. So yeah, so that was a study that came out, and I think we're going to continue to see more of those. But the root of it, which is important, that I think a lot of times, we're not going deeper when you get these headlines, is like, so what? How does that apply to my child, et cetera? And so, Ginkgo, while maybe delivering that news to you, Marlon, would also say, okay, here's how to talk about with your kids. Here's how to actually prevent this. And here's what you can do about it, as opposed to just be scaring yourself into posting this on YouTube or Facebook and riling everyone up.
Not surprising to me that you have been in the room with some of these folks, including Oprah. Not surprising. That's how I was feeling. I was trying to do the thing that you said, and let's think of how I was feeling talking to you. I feel vulnerable, impressed, a little bit nervous that I would buy anything you were selling. So that's those are the three things I was feeling. I'm just glad that you have good and positive intent behind it, and I know that just because of the things that I've seen what you've done in the past. I really appreciate you using your passion, your intellect, and just the brief period that you're here on earth, like all of us, to get in there and make it your business to make things better.
Well, thanks for giving my purpose a platform.
Well, you had mentioned something in your you have a TED Talk, which was excellent. I recommend it to
Oh
anyone.
my God, it's so funny. That was like when I was a baby. So this year, luckily, I'm doing a new one on parenting, which is
Wonderful.
exciting.
Wonderful. Where can they go to it? Is it at the
So it's going to be in Nashville. Yeah, I'm doing the TED in Nashville, and I'm actually doing an event there, a parenting event. And then I'll be at TED Next, which is more their podcast style that will be in Atlanta coming out and probably will hopefully get, I mean, they will put it on their platform, but I'm still kind of swallowing like, wow, this is exciting.
Well, your other one's on their platform too, and it's great. And I think it's going to probably serve as a pretty good foundation to show your commitment over, I mean, because that was what, 10 years ago that you did that one?
Yeah. So it'll be fun to see that.
Okay. Well, I have a bunch of questions. One is, where did all that wisdom come from? Two, at the end of that one, you did something that I often do. Sometimes I'll get invited to speak at a corporation, and often what I'll ask people to do is consider their top values in life, and based on acceptance and commitment therapy, how would they like to see those enacted or actually become how they spend their time. And you did the same thing, and that's how you ended the TED Talk. What are your first of all, what are your top 5?
My top 5 values.
Yeah. I want people to hear not necessarily the right answer, but what is the combination that leads to everything that we've been talking about?
Well, integrity is my number one value. So that I can stand fully behind, and that has not changed. Commitment, creativity, and honestly, I think the rest are always changing, but family is a foundational value for me coming from the Midwest. And I think, and not to like get woo, but I live almost like a life where when I'm not out in the world speaking, it's very Buddhist like and very sort of, I live down the street from an ashram. You can't really see neighbors around me. And I think I spend a lot of time thinking about my own thoughts. And I think having that space has been really important. But to your point, we spend our whole lives worrying about what people think of us until you realize that it doesn't matter. It's short. Whether someone likes you or loves you, um, it matters to be loved more than liked. And I think our society has sold us on something else. And so we just need to get back into loving one another, putting ourselves in places of service, and hopefully getting closer to ourselves and the people we love in the process.
Well, if all people hear is that what you just said, I think they're going to get a lot out of this conversation. And I appreciate, and I have been kind of looking over your shoulder this whole time at what seems to be a very peaceful, serene, I know you're not in a jungle, but
It looks like a
because I know
jungle,
where
yeah.
you are, but yeah.
Yeah.
But it does look incredibly peaceful. And I just, again, thank you for your time. Thank you for what you're doing for our young folks. Maybe if there is a next time, I would love to get into, and you started off with Gloria Steinem. I brushed over a lot in this episode that I think people are going to be interested in because I wanted to make sure you had time to talk about all the things that you're doing. But, we talked, and you've mentioned sort of Girls Inc. and some of the other ways that you're helping girls in our society, and with the effects of social media, that has been a major story. And just last week or 2 weeks ago now, our governor here in California put out an executive order about male and, boy mental health and sort of the risks of suicide and suicide prevention. And um, I would love to get your take on that too. So maybe next time um, you and I speak, I would love to just hear about the differences there and in our culture, expectations, and everything else. Are you open to that?
Yeah, it's interesting. I actually have a call with a boys organization today, and half the story at large is not only focused on girls. We just did a partnership with Girls Inc. And honestly, my hope is to bring many more men into this conversation because we just don't really give them the space to feel in the digital world, and the issues that they experience are just as intense.
Yeah, they're not doing very well mental health wise,
No, the
in this
boys are not
country.
okay.
Mm-mm. I don't know how, I was just watching Bill Burr, who is, incidentally also a boy, the comedian Bill Burr on his Hulu special recently, and he said that men are allowed two emotions in this culture, and that is angry and fine.
That hits.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good special, by the way. I don't know if I can
I
fully
have to
endorse
watch
it,
that
but
one.
yeah. So we will certainly talk again. Is there anything,
Yes.
Lars, that you would like to sort of leave us with in terms of how people can stay connected with you?
Yeah. Yeah. So I'll leave with on the note of the future is bright with less blue light. And,
Great. Great.
how do your people like to get in touch with your guests? Because, I'm like, what is the best way? I mean, if you have a kid and you want your kid to get involved in half the story, or you want to bring our programming to your educational institution, you can go to halfthestoryproject.com. We're offering, especially for states with bell to bell policies, free access to our resources to give teachers what they need. And if you're a parent struggling with the digital world and have a sticky scenario, just go to heyginkgo.com and we're here to support you.
Spell ginkgo for us.
GINKO.
Okay.
Like ginkgo tree.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Welcome back. Guess where we are? Guess what time it is?
Is it time for me to try to help?
I think that's exactly what time it is. Before I ask you a question, though, I want to remind our listeners about our recently launched way that they can also ask you a question. And
Ask me a question.
That's right. They can head to thishelpspodcast.com/ask and submit a video question. And if you do, we might play it on the podcast, and then you'll be on a podcast.
I'm here. I'm ready to help. Let me do it.
Yeah. And they can be really specific questions about advice. You have a roommate who won't stop leaving dishes in the sink.
Mm-hmm.
Marlon wants to answer that. Or if you want him to answer, those big life questions, or give you his top 5 90s R&B songs, whatever's in your heart that you're burning to know. All right. You ready for a question now, today?
Yeah, I guess.
I think a big part of the conversation that we had was obviously about mental health. Lars talked about the fact that she struggled with it as a young person. Social media was part of that. But even taking social media out of it, when should we start talking to our kids about mental health, and what are some good ways to do that?
I get a chance to talk to therapists a lot, especially people early in their career. And something I always try to remind them, and something I learned, is that you can't really take someone somewhere that you're not willing to go. I think the most important thing about your kid's relationship with mental health is your relationship with mental health, how comfortable you are identifying emotions out loud in front of them, saying sometimes it's scary, even for adults, being honest about vulnerabilities early on and not thinking that's going to all of a sudden make you less of a good parent. Like, you don't want to freak out about stuff. Of course, your kids are watching you to see if things are okay, but they're also watching you to see if you have the vocabulary and the confidence and the courage to talk about your own feelings. That's how they're going to learn it. Before you talk to them about their mental health, you need to just be able to describe how you're feeling and check in with yourself, know what your thoughts and feelings are, and the ones that are appropriate and the ones that you think they could relate to at whatever age is, I think that's the right time to say, all people have feelings. There's a bunch of different ones. And right now I'm feeling hopeful or, worried or anxious. And what that means is, I have things going through my mind that are, what if this doesn't work out well, or, trying to solve problems that haven't really happened yet. Anything you can do to get a vocabulary out there for your kids to learn, like emotional granularity and being able to, another one, if you can do it, is whenever you hear the word bored in your house, just nicely ask maybe what's underneath that.
You mentioned that in the episode, and I was curious if you could talk about specifically what a conversation like that has sounded like for you.
You want to do a little role playing?
Who am I?
You have to be someone who's bored.
I really panicked in that.
Yeah.
That was really, I really blacked out for a second.
Who am I? Pass out.
I truly was like,
Yeah.
yeah, sure. Hold on. Let me ask me again. I'll probably leave that in. But
You have to leave that
I'll
in.
leave it in.
That was incredible.
That's wild. Okay. Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. Was there a way I should have asked that differently so it didn't scare the shit out of you?
No, you asked a perfectly normal question. In my head, I thought I didn't know what the answer to not being bored was. So then I panicked and thought I was going to have to be the therapist here or the parent here.
I wouldn't do that to you.
Neither of which I'm qualified for. All right. I'm so bored.
Andrea, what do you mean you're bored?
I can't think of anything to do.
So you feel like you should be doing something? Strategic silence.
Yeah, it feels like the same thing. I'm trying to be okay. Now I'm actually trying to think about it honestly.
Here's the thing. I probably wouldn't give my kids a lot of strategic silence because they're not adults and they don't. He wouldn't care. He would he would just talk about something else. I did it for you because you were like, it felt like adult Andrea for a second.
Yeah, I really
So
struggled.
if you want to do this, we can do this.
I actually don't think that. Okay, I'm gonna answer this honestly. I don't think I ever feel bored, and not in the way that Lars said it, because I am never not working on a podcast or listening to a podcast or something like that. I'm never unplugged. And so I don't know that I would even recognize boredom. That is not a good thing for someone on a mental health podcast to say, but it is true.
I think it's a good thing because it's relatable to anyone. That's a great point. I think we're in a situation now where we don't ever really have to know what bored feels like.
And that's not good. I know that's not a good thing.
Well, yeah, but hopefully no one's judging you because we all do it. I love podcasts. I listen to them at night so I don't have to think about my own thoughts.
That's right. But should we be thinking about our own thoughts more?
I don't know. I think it... sometimes, yeah. Probably yes, more than we do. But it's a good question that you're asking because, and I think who is it that's saying bring back boredom? Dr. Michael Rich, I think, said, and Lars mentioned that too on the episode. This is something that we are seeing come up a lot. So like Jonathan Haidt's book, he's got a lot of great books, but The Anxious Generation, he and also Lenore, been on the show, Lenore Skenazy, talks about in Jonathan's book about a play-based childhood, having some freedom to be bored, and the ideas that can produce in your life. And there is so much we're missing if we don't give ourselves a little bit of time between hearing and reacting. That's what mindfulness is. Mindfulness is being able to have a second where you're actually part of everything and part of the decision-making process and can take in the situation that you're in and think how you would react, not just wait and watch how someone else does.
Can I ask a specific question?
Yeah.
So if you're the kind of person who isn't in the habit of recognizing when you need to take that pause, is there anything a person, anybody can do
Asking
to
for
sort
a friend?
Right, exactly. To make themselves more aware of that in the moment?
Well, there's a great book by Dan Siegel called Aware, which I do recommend. Apart from that, start small. Start with like 2 or 3 minutes of meditation where, a kind of a basic meditation is where you just picture or you just feel like one sensation. I usually use my feet touching the floor, and I try to focus on that gently and bring my mind back to it for like 2 or 3 minutes at a time.
Okay.
And you can also pair that with some mindful breathing, some box breathing, or count to 4, hold your breath for a little while, breathe out with a 4 count as well. Anything that kind of slows it down, regulates your breathing.
So it's sort of getting used to that, almost more like it's homework, kind of like scheduled. It's like build the muscle before you try to do it in the moment kind of thing.
Yeah, I think definitely try, start out with some breathing. Just get grounded. And you don't want to like take the Band-Aid off too early or just all of a sudden try to stop. When we got up this in the episode, like when schools just take away phones, it's like, what the hell? We just ask kids to have unlimited access to their phones and never think about their own feelings and always be advertised to and always be distracted. And then we just take it away. You can't do that. You can't do that as adults either. Like you'll freak out. Talk about anxiety. So there are times where we can practice putting our phone away when we're with another person. You can practice in other ways by just sort of preparing for a night where even watching a movie for 2 hours is hard for a lot of people now because it's one screen. It's at the pace of like still faster than regular life, but you're not totally in control. And, start small. Start small. Don't just start to pick up an old dusty book and start reading it. Your own thoughts are going to send you right back to a scroll immediately.
Okay. I say it every week. I mean it every week, but that feels really helpful. Let's remind me to check back in next week. I'm going to try it.
What are you going to try? Let's talk about it.
The 3 minutes, feet on the ground. That's as much as I can. I don't know that I'm going to get past that, but.
All right. I'll say this too. Currently, we don't have anyone sponsoring the show, but I do use Calm, the app. There are a lot of things in it that I think it's a little much. It can be distracting, but pretty much every day I do the daily trip with Jeff Warren. Love a good Jeff Warren. He's just kind of a soothing Canadian is how I'll describe him. And he just sort of teaches you about meditation. It's only 9 or 10 minutes usually. And get yourself in a room, wear headphones, make sure you're in a place where you feel safe and you could kind of really focus on nothing but that. And it's amazing how just focusing your attention and sort of guiding it and using those muscles help you for the rest of the day.
That's cool.
So yeah. And it's so easy now to just be a reaction to someone else's content. And you as a person, and I mean this for everyone, have more to offer than that. So unplug, Start small. It'll help in your relationships too. The person-to-person ones in real time.
Awesome. Thank you, Marlon.
Thanks for joining us today. We hope it helped. Stay connected with us at thishelpspodcast.com.